Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hi.
We have for you another Dudecast.
It's a Dudecast.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, buddy.
I think we should. Can we? This may be the future, the next Dudecast. Josh, I think you and I need to hook up because, we need to create another theme.
Yeah.
And I'll just bring all the guitars and the
Yes.
amps, and we'll just dance.
do it.
Yeah.
I can play a power chord.
Yeah,
There we
There
go.
we go.
Let's
Okay.
do it. We can make a music video.
I think we should. It should be like. See, I want it to sound like. Have you seen Team America: World Police?
Oh,
Yes.
America. I think it's got to sound like that.
I think that's exactly what I was going for.
That's
with
the sound.
I was like
You
trying.
won.
I was
Yeah,
trying
you
to
did
get
it.
that.
Yep.
But I think the Ronnie Coleman in there will add like a little dose of Dudecast.
I totally agree. That is for masculine energy only.
Lightweight, baby.
We could have a soundboard of Ronnie Coleman's. Just oh man.
I love that. Yeah. So that's going to be next Dudecast is what's today? January? I think middle of February we got
Yeah,
another one.
I think so.
I think for that one,
I love it.
Nice.
I'm setting the intention. I'm just
go.
going to send you some just wave files of riffs that I got.
That's
and
perfect. I could turn
you
it into
just
something.
turn it into
Yes,
something. Okay.
Exactly.
Excellent.
So excited. Any front desks? I don't know what anyone's got going on today or this week, or I haven't seen you guys since before New Year's. Is that the last time?
think so.
We were
Christmas?
off there.
Yeah.
It was Christmas, we talked about Qigong level 2.
Right.
Yep. Which is
It was before the New Year. 'Cause
Yep.
That's why I was like, hey, what do you guys do?
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's going on?
How's your
right now?
2025 been? It's
Oh,
been
man.
15 whole days.
It's been the best year yet.
Best year of my life.
Yeah, that's right. Other than the wildfires and stuff, but for us,
Yeah. Oh my God, that's insane.
it's crazy.
Well, Jeannie, we have students
Yeah.
in California. So one of her friends has been texting her all the updates and stuff. Oh my God, just insane to me.
A lot of my friends from Berkeley ended up moving to LA,
Mm-hmm.
and almost all of them lived in the area that got destroyed.
Wow.
So it's like
man.
artists and
Yeah.
families and just such a part of LA that is like the real people of LA.
Yeah.
That it's heartbreaking, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy to see.
I've never lived anywhere west of the Mississippi, remote.
Mhm.
I mean, I've been to California maybe twice. So
Okay.
never LA. So just the idea of wildfires is so foreign, and still to me how do they happen to get that bad? You know what I mean? I'm just
Oh, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, no, you go.
I was just going to say, I remember was it 2023 summer, right? When we had all this
that's
smoke.
right.
And I was like, we don't get this.
Right,
This isn't
right.
something that happens to, but it did. And so it's like seeing the real McCoy happening
Seriously.
live. You're like, oh man,
Yeah.
that's
Well, and
gnarly.
it's like the perfect storm of the 100-mile-per-hour winds. It's
Right.
that is just. I was telling Francine that when my brother Jason used to live in San Francisco, and for his wedding, they rented an Airbnb, and at that time it was like a 3-month drought. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So you couldn't. They said in the Airbnb rental, if you start a fire, you will be persecuted.
Oh
It's
my
we will know that
We
it
will-
started here. It's that kind of thing where it's no cigarettes anywhere. And
Oh, wow.
they said, I was seeing that they're speculating that it started on a walking trail.
Okay.
Somebody might have thrown a cigarette to
cigarette?
start the
Could
whole
you
thing.
imagine if they knock on your door with a subpoena? Or
Yeah.
whatever? I mean, probably you get criminally prosecuted, but you'd also be held liable for.
I
mean,
think something like
hundreds
that.
of millions.
Well, and it's say you're visiting from New York City, you're like, man, I'm just on a walk,
Yeah.
whatever,
Right.
have a cigarette, or smoke a joint or something like that, it's in California.
I got into the habit recently. I mean, before it really got cold, it's I would take the dogs for a walk, and I got some cigars that are smaller ones. I'm like, this is the perfect size for
Yeah.
just a little walk.
Little
So I'm
misses.
just dipping the ashes. I didn't. I mean, always but I had to time it. So as soon as I'm done with it, it just goes
Yeah.
right.
Let it
There was
rip.
a collection of 3 or 4 of them finished by our back door, and Jeannie's like, "What is going on here?" I was like, "Ugh, yeah, it's my fault."
Oh, man.
But I never would have thought twice about that. Even the summer and the dry period, when it gets dry
course.
here,
Yeah.
never would have thought. So it's so far removed from my experience. It's just so it's just so wild to me how it can get that out of control.
When you
quickly.
think about it, it's wild that we don't really get much in the way of natural disasters here at all. Like,
No,
I
we're in
mean,
a great
what,
spot.
we got like an ice storm once in a while,
Right.
Right.
It's
And
not
even
bad
then,
here.
it's
Yeah.
like compared to other places in the country, it's like
Right.
our relatively mild winters now in comparison to like even Chicago or
Right.
like just. But I always say that I feel like we live in like a. This is the place in like when all natural resources start to go away. People
Yeah.
are like, we got to get up to the Finger Lakes. you know,
Seriously.
like,
Well, it's like, yeah,
it's
we don't-
insulated. It's not on the coast.
We're not
it's-
like in a, like, I mean, it's not likely going to flood. I mean, and definitely no, like, then we had an earthquake about a year ago in the summertime. I mean, it was so mild. It was
Right.
not like a real earthquake, but it was something where like Jeannie and I were in the house and we're like,
What the heck?
did that just happen?
That happened once back in like around 2001. I lived downtown, and I guess we're on a shale kind of a layer. And it was funny because I had somebody who I lived with in that apartment, and she had just moved in, and she wakes me up in the middle of the night because it's like, you know, she's like, what is that? And I was half asleep, and I was like, oh, there's squirrels in the attic. And she's like, that's not fucking squirrels, dude. And I was
Shaking
like,
the house.
you know, and I was like, you're right, that's not the squirrel.
It's the biggest squirrels in history.
Oh my god.
Oh my
Yeah,
Lord.
I mean, that's what Jeannie says. She's like, you know, we don't. This is what I say to myself when I'm scraping the car off with snow. I'm like,
Yeah.
we don't have alligators.
Nope.
We don't have a lot of earthquakes.
Huge spiders,
We
like
don't
some
have-
spiders.
Right. We don't have.
Nothing venomous at all, really.
No, yeah,
Like,
we're
maybe
like-
somewhere, but you'd have to like look for it.
And
you
it's
know?
like we don't have Ron DeSantis. We don't have, it's like we have snow though.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, today is a dude cast, and I was like, we got to talk about alpha males.
Three alpha males right here.
We got 3 alpha males right here. Is this like a new term? Like relatively? Because I don't really. I mean, maybe like being in my 20s, and this is like early 2000. Like I was born in '79, so I turned 21 in 2000, and like. I don't remember hearing like there's definitely ideas about masculinity, right? About like what makes a man or blah. But like this whole like alpha male push, I feel is relatively new. I don't know.
I feel like I first became aware of it when I read, and it's weird because I remember this. Like it stuck in my mind. It was like, that's odd, you know? So I was reading, you know, the online magazine Slate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was reading Slate, and this was probably around like a decade or more ago. And they were interviewing this dude who was a self-marketed, like, dating player guru.
Okay.
He was like a game
Yeah.
guy. You heard of this?
It
Yes.
sounds familiar.
And that's
Yeah.
where I first sort of saw this this kind of push towards a certain type of like quote unquote masculinity, and it was all about like basically getting laid.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
they
yeah.
were pushing for.
Like the pickup artist?
yeah, like pickup
Yeah,
artists.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that was exactly it. And I was sort of like, huh, that's lame, you know?
Yeah, right, exactly.
But yeah, and then it I think it took off, right? Like it
Yeah.
seems like it's
Oh, I feel
really
like-
endemic now.
Right. I mean, at least 5. I mean, I want to say 2016 and maybe 15, 14. I remember hearing the term like alpha male. Like this is what an alpha male is. And I always thought that was so weird.
Well, I think it comes along with like people starting to evaluate the toxic aspects of masculinity. Like I don't remember when I was younger, like people talking about masculinity as being toxic at all. Like where
Yeah.
it's like that became, I think that as Me Too movement started happening, like more
Yeah.
awareness towards like, you don't have to act like your dad did. Like
Yeah.
the kind of the boomer generation of like machismo, like type of, I don't know, way of being. I don't know that. I feel like that's changed so much
Yeah.
since they were younger, and then now that they're parents. I don't like that whole idea. Only I feel like started being talked about that way relatively within the
Right.
last 20 years.
Not
you know?
not very long ago.
I think there's also this interesting thing that's happening where there's now like a reactionary sort
Yep.
of reclamation thing happening where it's like there's this sense from a certain segment of males that they're being persecuted
Yes.
by, you know, the Me Too movement. And maybe you should look at that. If you feel persecuted by the Me Too movement, maybe you should think about that. But
Right.
the interesting thing is that then they're like, they're pushing back. And so it becomes this sort of it's become a polemic now where it's embraced that you are talking, it's like bring toxic masculinity back. And,
like in social media, I think there's definitely like an entertainment aspect to like Liver King, like those type of like lifting accounts, like guys that are like, like the cold plunge. Like I always tell Francine, my algorithm is filled with like men getting into cold baths in the morning who are like, this is hard, but if I can do this, you can do it too. And it's like, and they're, whether it's good for you, I'm sure, and I know it is, it's like, there is like men can still be men, like, and we can show everyone.
It's hard because my algorithm too, like not too long, a couple years ago, it was just like cold plunge, like became really popular. And here's all the benefits, which like, I haven't researched it that much. Brian, do you know a lot about like any benefits if there are of something like a cold plunge?
So there is some, where you saw that take off, obviously like European cultures have cold plunging as part of their sort of cultural expression. And there's all kinds of reasons for it that go beyond health, I think.
Right.
But like where you see it really take off in the West is with Wim Hof method.
Yes, the Wim Hof method.
Yeah,
that's right.
Wim Hof, you know who Wim Hof is?
No, what's that?
So he's this dude who's called the Iceman. And he's a Dutch guy who had some really legit trauma in his life. He also was on some sort of artistic, spiritual paths. And what he did was he kind of took different pieces of different systems. So one of them is Tumo, or like this, it's like a Himalayan breathing method for high altitude and cold. But he adopted it, and as lots of us white folk do, is he made it the Wim Hof method. And so that's the Wim Hof method breathing. Which, by the way, I love Wim Hof. I got no beef with him, but that's what he did. Is he took this Eastern thing and made it his own. And then he has like all these records for cold exposure, so like longest time underwater in ice water.
Yeah, I've seen videos of him like meditating in the Himalayas, covered in ice and snow, and like with no jacket on, just like sitting there
steaming.
Steaming, like and it's crazy. It is really entertaining and like catches your eye and mind.
Totally.
In a way that is like nothing I've really.
And is it a
seen.
masculine energy thing where you're like, I wonder how
maybe
would I hang trying to do something like that?
It's funny. So I've been thinking about it since you guys mentioned it, and I think that there's something really interesting, which is this spectrum of like the self-help improvement world and where that sort of bridges into this men's. And I think that there's a lot of things that appeal to, let's say, like cisgendered hetero males of a certain age. And so it's like that's almost like an entry level into this world where you may then at some point, if you click the right sequence of things, start becoming kind of radicalized in a way.
Without kind of knowing it right away. Like you
easy.
you just slowly like, I agree with what this guy's saying. Right. And just
and definitely, like you said, I think that I say this sometimes because it's like, I feel like there is an understanding of history in a way that where you could blame most atrocities and colonization and all these things on straight men, like straight cis hetero men who that we know of, right? If they were, if they were gay, they weren't saying it, or there wasn't written about them, like where
it just had he had a best friend that they lived together forever, died in
right, exactly. Together. They were just writing letters to each other for years and years and years because they're best friends. But it's like I think, like you said, there's like a reverse, like a radicalization of maybe those some people who are feeling offended by that, like that feel offended in their privilege and in their position that they're like, I can claim this and it's okay, and it is, but it's like there is I think it kind of can wade into the toxic masculinity world with that kind of pride in that way. I don't know.
And think of how like Facebook and Google's algorithms work as they want to polемicize things and then make it angry.
Yes.
Because then you're gonna get more engaged,
active.
and you're gonna start sitting there watching video after video and sit through the ads and all that.
I caught myself doing something like this because on YouTube I watch like a lot of people review movies, and this may be going back to 2020, 2021. A guy that I like popped up in my feed. He reviewed a couple movies. I mean, mainly like big like pop movies like Marvel stuff. And like I found myself agreeing with them. I'm like, I didn't like it either. And maybe this is why. And then I'm like, I had like it was a couple months of like, oh, I wonder if the guy watched something new or something. I'm like, this guy's angle is concerning. You know what I mean? So I do like a pause. I'm like, okay, you're talking a lot about this one thing about the movie or the movies you're noticing or why you're not liking them. I'm like, all right, I feel like I'm looking around, I'm like, am I being radicalized right now? Like, I want to agree because I kind of don't like the movie too, but like, I don't want to be careful to be like, well, this is why, because everyone is woke and blah. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's kind of like, but just, it was very easy because like you said, like people are so willing and it's easier to watch something that you disagree with or hate watching will get more clicks than like, I think this thing is awesome.
Definitely.
And I want to share, be like, boring.
I think a lot of.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
No, I was going to agree with what you said. Like that is the way the internet works. And it's the darkest. That's like, I think one of the darkest impacts on our society today is that it's set up for you to find negative and influence your negative emotions in a way that's like subliminal, you know, like, and it's subliminal and it's right in your face and it is effective. It's like so effective.
And I think a lot of the personalities that are driving, maybe like call it like a men's rights movement right now, or like a anti-woke men's thing, is really like folks who are actually, you know, they're intelligent and they're capitalizing. They're basically using like clickbait strategies.
Yeah.
So like a great example of this is Jordan Peterson.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like I actually read his book, his popular book. I didn't read the other one, but his popular book, which is like 12 lessons for,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of it, like the vast majority of it is really, really basic, like applies to men, women, anybody, reasonable stuff, you know?
Right.
And then, you know, at some point, I think Jordan Peterson figured out that like he can get way higher book sales if everybody is talking about him. And so what does he do? He goes and he starts wearing like a crazy looking coat with lobsters on it and pissing everybody off.
Yeah.
And then boom, his book sales go through the roof. He's like a, you know, multi-millionaire now because he pissed everybody off.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot of like craven, you know, sort of capitalization on people's anger happening right now. You know.
Well, and it's so impactful. It's like to see, even in the results of the last election, you know, like to support a man like that is a response to this type of algorithmic furor that comes with just existing, you know, like I think that as the young men who were so like emboldened by that type of perspective, kind of the reaction to the wokeness, right, and in quotes, is like this, I don't know, like this fake masculinity, you know, like or old school masculinity, right, like in the way that it used to be seen, and that's just it's very interesting because it's almost anti-intellectual in a way, right? Like it's like I don't need to think about it that much,
Right.
Like you know, like
Well,
you're making me think too hard about it.
It's interesting you bring up like the reaction to it and like the almost blowback to movements like Me Too, the Me Too movement, where like men will hear stories from women about what they've gone through, and you know, because I think a lot of the problem is, I think you mentioned, so whoever said the word pride, where it's like pride and ego, where like you can't hear someone tell the story like that without saying, oh, well, that's not me, or I didn't do it. Like, so why are you saying all these things? And it's like, it requires you to put your ego aside, which takes training and practice if you're not toxic. You know what I mean? Or it's like if you're not already just like, you know, thinking you're being blamed for something, you know?
You know, and there's, I think, also a piece to this where there's a compassionate piece where it's like you've got these young men, I think, that form the audience for this kind of stuff, a lot of it, or you know, let's say folks who are maybe in a lower socioeconomic strata and they're online and they're, you know, and so one of the things that I think happens is like people who are manipulating media into this anger clicking sort of profitable place, they're essentially the only figures that are they're the ones that are creating straw men, right? So it's like they create this straw man out of, let's call it like woke liberal ideology for like, and then when the straw man is attacked, it creates this enormous sense of like identity where it's like, I am not for that.
I mean, it's community that they're missing, right? Or that is kind of absent in a lot of young men's lives, I think, their experiences. So like, especially online. I mean, if they're already more isolated than 20, 30 years ago, it's not hard to then create this sense of community by saying, hey, we all hate the same thing, or like, isn't this
easiest way, right?
Yeah.
Well, and there's a lot to be frustrated about.
Yeah.
I think that there's enough in the world in general, no matter your socioeconomic, sexual preference, whatever the case is, there's enough online and in the world to be really frustrated and angry about. Whether it's not being able to afford a house, like whether it's like having it worse than your parents did, like all of those things lead to an anger that needs to go somewhere.
Right.
And it's like there aren't many safe spaces to be honest about your anger in a way that's healthy. Like I feel like to feel the pressure of life in general as like a young man, like without the hopefulness that like maybe your parents had when they were graduating college, like to feel like when you graduate college, you're fucked, like no matter what, because you can't pay your loans back unless you get a good job.
Right.
And if you get a good job, you're still going to have to pay rent because houses are unaffordable. There's just a lot of different things that feel like heavy, I think, for young men.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it leads you to these, it leads to incel behavior, right? Like incels where it's like, oh, I'm so much safer being able to say whatever I want on the internet than having to interact with anyone really, and so there's a little bit of that too. I think that becomes addicting to, and purposefully so, to be isolated, to be righteous, to be prideful, rather than having the humility to evaluate your situation and like understand that like you're gonna keep learning about where you are in this world and what your impact can be. And it's like I think that it's a crux, it's a problem. And like with the compassion, like trying to see those people with compassion rather than just like, you guys are fucked, like a man again, that there's space there. I think there needs to be more space for it. And what Jordan Peterson is offering is like almost like a recipe to feel validated.
Exactly. And that taps into it.
Like, and it scratches an itch.
He's not saying, well, you need to really evaluate your behavior and your worldview. And it's like, no, he's saying you have a right to be like, you're right. Like you should be upset or you should be angry. And like, he feeds it.
And it's not your fault. It's like that's the other part of it. It's someone else. It's
or
the straw man.
It requires no work or not as much work on your part.
Exactly.
What's kind of ironic and interesting is like if you read Jordan Peterson's book, on the other hand, it's like take responsibility for yourself, be a man,
right?
And there is sort of, I think, a masculinity problem right now in that, like when we're speaking about those who wish to be masculine in the cisgendered heteronormative way that, I think that there's like a certain amount of cultural schism where there's at least a large group of people who feel that they aren't able to express like, sort of quote unquote traditional masculine values anymore. And so then they feel this need to be reactionary against whether it's imaginary or not. I think that there is a sense that, you're supposed to be careful in ways that you didn't have to be careful before.
Right.
You have to be analyzing your thoughts and your speech and your behaviors in a new way. And that's hard for a lot of people.
Which like in some cases it's like you need to do that like at all.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like
totally.
And if you grew up watching fathers or older brothers like behave and that's where you learned all of your norms, so to speak, and then you're an adult, you're in your young mid-20s, and they're saying, well, actually, everything about the way, this is the way I could see the message being received. It's like everything about the way you are in the world and like how you react to it and what you value is actually like it's all toxic.
Yeah, it's
And-
all toxic and
like,
it's all your fault.
And how do you
you know,
how do you not react? How do you
Right.
not get like how do you not like
Feel
take
that.
that and be like, wow, I didn't do anything to you right now.
Right.
Why
I didn't
am I
exist then.
Why am I getting this message?
Yeah,
right.
right.
Yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, my idol, and I mean, I had the hat and I had a leather jacket.
Oh,
had
I know
a
where you're
rat-
going.
You know where I'm going.
Oh,
with
yeah.
this. It was Indy, man. It was
Absolutely.
Indiana Jones.
Of course.
100%
Yes.
idol when I was a kid. And it's funny because I rewatched the movies
Oh, yeah.
with my son. And there's like Raiders of the Lost Ark, scene 3. He essentially sexually assaults Marianne, and I was like, "Oh,
God,
yeah."
darn
Like you know. And then we watched Star Wars, and Harrison Ford also kisses somebody without
Right,
consent.
yeah.
And it's like, so it's interesting because it's like when you think about it,
Uh-huh.
you know, there is this whole cultural narrative that up until a certain point was just like, this is what is a man, you know?
Right.
And now we're righteously turning that around a little
Yeah.
bit. And, you know, it's interesting, though, because one thing is when I was around 22, Lord of the Rings comes out.
Oh, okay.
Now, you know, when you think about it, I'm about to go full dork.
I
love it.
You're in the right
I'm
place.
going
You're in the
full
right
dork,
place with us too.
boys.
Yeah, we're all about
All
it.
right, Aragorn.
Yep.
Yes.
That is a man, right?
Absolutely.
And he is respectful. He's sensitive.
Yep.
He listens to women. He like, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, he's got
Yeah.
all the traits you want
Yeah.
as like a truly masculine man. But he does so without being like a dick,
Right.
which is unique because I think
Yeah.
that's you know, and it's interesting that it's from like older source material. You go
Right,
back to
I
this
mean-
like gallantry, you know. but-
Right.
Yeah, you know, Tolkien pulled from like the Middle Ages myths, right? Like
Yeah.
he was writing all that.
Knights.
But yeah, I mean, but like, yeah, the character of Aragorn, I think, is the perfect sacred, like a great example of the sacred masculine,
Right.
where like he will take out his sword and knife 1,000 orcs because he's got to do it, but like his friend died and he has no problem like crying because
Right.
Boromir is dead.
Yes.
Right? You know what I mean? It's like the ability to express emotion, which I mean. That alone, right there, is a whole podcast topic. Holy cow!
God, yeah.
Young men or men at all expressing emotion is just another layer. But yeah, I mean, in my algorithm, it's like Lord of the Rings. It's like here's the man, and it's Aragorn, and here's why. And it's like but the same thing. Indiana Jones, huge. Like watched it young, like
Yeah.
loved it, of
and
course.
Han Solo, right?
Right,
I
and
mean,
then when you go back, it's almost like when you go back and rewatch a lot of things from 80s, 90s, right? We often, what did Jeannie and I watch? We watched Revenge of the Nerds, right? And then we're like, the first time we watched it after years, we were like, oh my God.
you're like, this is
There
None
are,
of this would fly.
there are like,
None.
there are like felonies.
Yeah, right.
Treated as like
Hilarious.
hilarious,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, right.
straight
And
comedy.
then,
yeah.
and then it's like that. It starts like the discussion. It's like Revenge of the Nerds is canceled, or like that. This is like what we think the conversation would be if that was like popular. If like the Nerds was popular, it's like, oh, it's going to be canceled. Part of me says if I'm watching something from 30 years ago and it's not different, I'm like, that's not a great sign. Like it's good to at least be like, okay, our values have progressed a little bit to at least now we're like, that's not funny.
Well, right.
That's
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So like
Right.
there's that. But then like the redirection with that is like, oh, it's like, are we just canceling everything from 30 years ago? And like, oh, the Indiana Jones is not a hero because he did this. I'm like, we got to calm down a little bit. Like there's a middle ground here where we can like still enjoy it, but also be like, our worldview has changed. And It's
Right.
like we would not want the same exact thing now that we did when this came out so long ago.
Well, and it's so tough with comedy. I feel like comedy is like so hard to because that it's the age old joke, right? It's a joke.
yeah.
It's like it's a joke. So like you can't tell a joke because people are too sensitive to understand the joke, but it's like but the premise of that joke is wrong. It's like yeah, it's a joke.
Yeah.
It's like but what is allowed is we're at a crux in culture I think at this point where because of the internet and because of the like common consciousness we're all sharing, it's opened up channels for empathy and care for women in a way that has never existed.
Right.
Where like the boys will be boys aspect of culture, like literally of representation of men's representation in movies and everything has gone away in a great way. Like in a way that it's like, you know, boys will be boys could have been a blanket statement for all sexual
yeah.
assault for like 50 years, you
Yep.
know, like, and it's like, well, But and there's just such a different when you talk to women from that era. You know, like even my parents or like they have a much wider acceptance of bad behavior.
Yeah.
You know, like of like questionable, like, wait, what? Like, I don't know. That isn't, and even like people understanding their autonomy and like asking for that to be respected. Like that's a relatively new concept in our culture, which is like, of course there's going to be friction for those who don't get to experience the freedom and privilege of doing and saying whatever the fuck you want. You know, like obviously that reckoning for the new generation is like when you see a movie like that, they're like, what the fuck? Like that's it. That seems like pretty funny, you know, like and fun and freedom. And like, it's like, yeah, but no, you know, like
I mean, it's always this kind of fine line, right? Because I think that so much of the you know, polemicizing of everything is also, and creating straw men while you're at it. It's like, if you're attacking comedians when they are making social commentary that they like obviously don't want
Prescribe
to
to.
like prescribe.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not trying to say this is how we should be. They're actually like making fun of the
The
I
stuff.
think that that's inherently different from sort of maybe pausing the movie and like telling your kids like, hey, this is a little problematic. Like
Right.
we don't grab women and kiss them without consent when they say no. You know, like it's a whole different thing. And so the thing that I'm always curious about is like how much. I think that there was like a minute in time where like Tumblr was really, really popular and Twitter was like at its peak user. And what could happen is you could have sort of a mob thing happen where it's like, you know, they dig up a comment that a comedian or a rapper made that might have been within the culture and time, at least normalized for them in that moment. Right. And so then they dig up this thing and now it's like, okay, now you're canceled.
Right.
And it's like, I think that there's a line that can be crossed easily, and then you get reactivity to it.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know? And that's where we've been at for a minute.
Right.
And it's funny because I don't know about like my kids are 18 and 15.
Okay.
And it's funny because they were the cancel
Yeah.
culture. They were
Right.
absolutely like they were active online and they were like a part of that movement.
Yeah.
And now they're like kind of a hard backslide into
Yeah.
a more 80s-ish sort of a jam now.
It's so, I mean, I feel like things like this move really fast nowadays.
Yeah.
Jeannie and I were also talking about this idea that generations are getting smaller. Like, because, and I agree with this because change is happening so rapidly. Like, we used to think of generations as like people born in a certain like time,
period,
right? And think of the changes that happen, like the changes that happen in a boomer's life, like from 45 to like the 1980 something. I mean, my upbringing was not terribly different than my parents. I mean, in a lot of ways. But my upbringing compared to my kids' upbringing was drastically
Substantially
different.
different.
Like,
Yes.
exponentially more change. So I think like because change is so happening, like those cohorts are like smaller. Like instead of 45 to 62, it's going to be like, you know, 2010 to 2018 can be like one group because in 18 something else happened. It's like, you know, that causes their life to be different than the previous generation.
Right.
Oh yeah, but like remember the canceling about like, oh, so-and-so had a tweet 8 years ago about this. And it's like, oh, canceled.
Well, and then they have to apologize, like for something they said 8 years ago that nobody cared about then. And it's like, and you can't even get back to your thinking on it. But I think that the thing that's happening is, I think that people get canceled and then they come back.
Oh,
like now people are coming back.
I
and
still
it's,
maintain cancel culture doesn't exist because I still don't know of one person who lost their career,
right, for real.
like for being not for doing something illegal and going to jail.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Like
someone,
Harvey Weinstein. Like
Right.
Right, yeah.
Or
Or like-
should have, you know?
Right.
someone like, you know, is arrested, prosecuted,
Right.
convicted. Someone that like did something out of taste and the collective agreed that they are not supporting this person anymore. I mean, even like J.K. Rowling, who said what she said years ago. I mean, like, I don't know how she's doing now, but like, I still think people consume Harry Potter content.
Well,
I
literally,
think,
HBO
you know,
paid like hundreds of millions of dollars to develop a series about it.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
like, so it's still people come back.
Yeah.
And
you know?
I think if you think about it, what actually happens is that you politicize that artist.
Right.
And now they're going to be on that
side,
of the
yes.
camp, right? Because they are going to get their maximum profits that way. Not to make it Marxist, but it's like, at the end of the day, it's like who profits?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like certainly not victims.
Right.
You know
No.
what I mean? It's
Right.
going to be the artists are going to now change camps because you put them there.
Right.
And like I think that you see that happen more often than you see like the crimes being actually prosecuted effectively.
Right.
You know what I mean? As you see like this big cultural backlash against an artist, the artist then leans into that persona because now they have this whole new audience that it draws. And it's like, you know what? Netflix profits. Dave Chappelle, for instance, profits
Right.
greatly.
Yep.
Dave Chappelle's fans all will enjoy his
Rally.
content.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, like the opposite side will go and watch just so they can like
Be
you know,
mad about
write
it,
and be
talk
pissed
about it,
off,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
So everybody's profiting off of this polemic, except for like trans people who
Right.
he made fun of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And,
Right.
and when you listen to his jokes, you know, like without excusing anything he said, he's not actually trying to make a political statement in the
Right.
first place.
Yeah.
He
Right.
was not.
He's
you
making
know?
fun of that people think he is.
Yeah.
Like he's making a joke about the seriousness of
But
all
now
of it.
he's leaned fully
Into it,
and he's
yes.
like,
Yeah.
that's going to be a part of every routine he does
Right.
now,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So that sucks.
It
Like,
does suck. It sucks.
I like Dave Chappelle, you know, and I didn't want
I
that
know.
to happen for him.
Well, and
you
I
know?
think that one of the things that is really hard to combat is, like you said, like the generational difference. Like we're raising kids in a scenario that, like, I at least grew up with when I was a kid. The internet started to be a thing, at least for me. There, it wasn't, and then it was. So I lived in the before times, I
Right.
lived in the middle, and now I'm living in this next time. So I have like the adaptability aspect to it. But people who are like our parents' age, how do you teach your son to be a healthy masculine person when you never had to live with the internet? You didn't
Yeah.
have to live with social media and the incredible focus on your image, like your image being clean and like
Right.
making sure that, like, because it can affect your future now in
Oh,
a
yeah.
way that is so different. Like,
Yeah.
how do you advise someone to embrace exactly who they are if online everywhere certain aspects of who you are being, whether you're cis or whether things that you don't control, right? Like, are being like kind of reevaluated in a way your parents never had to think about it. You know, like you didn't have to think like our kids, a lot of their fun comes online. Like it's like I'm trying to think of how to parent someone, because my parents were like, get the fuck outside. You know, like okay, come back if you get hurt, or it's like, or like if it's time to eat, you know, like basically is the
yeah.
thing. And our kids are like, hell no, you know, like no, all my friends are on the internet right now, you know, like, and so it's like, I don't want to do that. And so that's really, how do you really teach someone? Like, part of masculinity for us, well, for me growing up, was like the physicality of being a child.
Yeah.
You know, like was like are you tough enough to handle someone making fun of you?
Right.
Like, are you gonna cry about it and call your mama? Like, because then you aren't included in the
Right,
group. Like,
yeah.
it's like,
Which is very old.
It's
if you
so
that
old
goes
school.
Back
It
to
is.
some old limbic system, like hunting party, war party
Totally.
shit. You
Right.
know, where it's like I think that in a lot of ways, the way that men make fun of each other and kind of like rib each other, give each other shit, you see it cross culturally, and it's like I think it's a way of testing weakness within a fighting party, essentially,
Totally.
you know.
Yeah.
And that's old, like that's
yeah.
deeply ingrained in there. And now it's punished, right?
Yes,
and
it's
it's punished
punished.
in a very immediate and sometimes widely ranging consequential way. If you do it online, for instance, and you
Right.
get yourself into hot water online, like that's a permanent consequence.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
interesting you said about like the ribbing can be like a test for to be included in the group, right? And if it is 20, 30 years ago, if it's 1990 and I'm like 10, you know what I mean? And they're like, who's the group? My 3 or 4 other friends,
Yeah.
right? Same thing could be said today, and it's like, who's the group? 1 million people online. You
Right.
know what I mean? It's just
Right.
like the scope of it. So like, what does that do to the psyche?
and permanence.
And right, yeah.
Like, it's like, damn, if I had the internet in the way that kids have it now when I was their age, I would be fucked.
Me too.
My
All of
parents
us
would have caught me, you know,
Oh,
like
yeah.
doing everything, like even that, the policing of our children is different, you know, like, and the worry, like, it's like, I think my parents, like, even just letting us go, like, go ahead, go ride your bike to your friend's house across a bunch of busy streets. Like, me and Francine talking about that, like, it's so, you hear more horror stories than you could ever comprehend at this time.
From all over the
all-
country. all over-
exactly.
you know, if you think about it, when you talk about like, well, what is masculinity really?
right.
Like what is it? Because I think it means different things to
Right,
different
I know. Like,
people.
if we're gonna treat this academically, it's like we got to define our terms. Like, how
Right.
how do we like? What do you think of? How do we define it? I mean, it's you know different today than you know maybe the lessons we
Consistently
got.
being redefined.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
But if you think about it, like if at some level risk taking is linked inherently with confidence, right? So it's like confidence, bravery, risk taking. I think those are all values that still hold true. They held true in the Middle Ages. They hold true in the modern era, you know?
Right.
And so it's like we, to a large degree, have taken a generation of kids and we've removed their ability to take risk from them.
Yes.
And so it's like, where's the meritocracy that they can create on the playground if they're not allowed to, you know, at some level demonstrate bravery?
Right. Yeah.
And that could be in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be in some, you know, like typical way, like on the, you know, on the athletic field. It could be that they like are a brave artist in the school and they like stand out with the way that they present themselves. But yeah, I think we don't value risk taking the way that we did. And there's a problem there. Like it stunts a certain, like it leaves them feeling like they have no way to prove themselves, you know?
Right.
Because
that's
proving
tricky.
themselves is like getting likes,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
like getting likes is like, like our
Yeah,
kids,
like,
they talk
ugh.
all the time about wanting to set up an account so they could get likes. And I'm like, how do you even know what that is? You don't have a social media account. But they watch YouTube videos that are like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so like they say like, what's the number one profession kids want to be? They say a YouTuber.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's the number one thing. And what is a YouTuber?
Well, even I
Like-
mean, Eden, our youngest, if she is 21, I mean, 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that was like career opportunity. What do you think you want to do? Like YouTuber,
Yeah.
like influencer. I'm like, I don't know. What does that mean?
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
Well,
like
and it's like the algorithm itself, like we've talked about, is meant for negativity. It's like it works better when people are like people participate more in the interactions, which is all that the goals are. Clicks and eyes, the seconds you're looking, right? The negative gets longer watches, more interaction,
Yep.
all that. And a teenage mind is already negative. Like a young, like they're already battling their own demons. And so without having the reinforcement of like, it creates a lot of softness and a lot of sadness in a way that it's like, dude, like you can't make fun of your friends. Like,
I know.
You're
Yeah.
going to tattle on your friend for like making a joke to you. Like, it's
Yeah.
like that. In my day, then no one would ever play with me again. You know, like that
And
kind of
isn't
thing.
it kind of human nature when you're in sort of an insular, like an in-group environment, especially with other men, that it's like you push boundaries of
Yeah.
what's acceptable as a way to sort of increase bonding, right?
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
It's totally normal, right? And
oh, very much. Yeah.
and so I think that there is a predictable backlash against the perception of that. Because I don't think
Yeah.
that actually, that I think a lot of that straw man stuff, where it's
I
like,
agree.
like, you know, this is what the left is trying to do to us, and they're telling us that we're not allowed to like G.I. Joe anymore.
Right,
And it's
exactly.
like,
It's not true.
I'm pretty sure I've never heard anybody in Ithaca say one fucking word about like whether you're allowed to like G.I. Joe or not. You know what I mean? And Ithaca, you'd hear about it.
You
here,
would.
you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
This is the place.
Like we are at the apex. Of,
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
So it's like if we're not talking about it, it's not happening, guys.
It's
It's true.
it's funny you bring up like again like the ribbing and the making fun, but like usually, I mean, in the online space, it can get so, not only just so nasty, but like there's no then inclusion into the group.
Right.
There's
it's
no
just
like
anonymity.
we're just giving you
anger.
shit.
Yeah.
We're making fun of you. That's what we do. And then like there's the community that can build, which is definitely absent in the online. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, in a way, or then it's just like, or like it's like the recruiting. You know what I mean? It's like,
Well, and to take an insult or a joke in person with someone
yes,
is so different than like 100,000 people writing underneath something you post that you're like a
Right.
fat idiot. You know, like it's like there's like because there is the space for that. You know, like and you can't control or know or actually interact. You a lot of the time don't have an option to really directly interact with people who are trolling you. And trolling is different than what we're talking about, right? Like there's a toxic aspect to all of this. Even the
Yeah.
ribbing your friends can get out of hand, you know,
Oh, yeah.
like and
Surely.
can affect someone like really negatively in the long run. But it's like without the freedom to try and without the freedom to socialize that way, I don't know, it makes it so that everyone is always so nervous about offending each other, which
Yeah.
is like an interesting thing. Obviously, we want to be kind to each other and empathetic to each other
Yeah.
and see each other for where they are and like make sure we're not creating these small T traumas for people.
Right.
But it also takes away like kind of there's a fun aspect to that bravery, you know, like that kind of interaction that is a little unknown, like what's going to happen next, you know? And I grew up with 2 older brothers, and then all my friends in high school were huge football players, and I was the smallest one. So it's like I totally could take it, you know? Like I knew
You got a lot of chances to be brave, and demonstrate
yes,
value,
and to
right?
demonstrate that
Yeah.
you're not going to affect me, you
Right,
know, like
yeah.
that, like is part of, and that's a strong skill for life because you're going to be interacting with a ton of people you can't control, and so it's like the ability to do that is, I feel like that's missing in a certain way.
Well,
you
and
know?
there's also this piece of it that's like kind of mind reading when you're interacting with
Yeah.
somebody. Like you see it in jujitsu a lot. So it's like we're like physically engaged. We're rolling around on the ground in this simulated fight to the death. And it's funny a lot. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of funny stuff.
Yes.
Like so today, just before I got here, I was rolling with a really good training partner of mine who I trust and we like each other. And in that roll, I slapped him in the face twice, which is illegal in jiu-jitsu. And then he called me a fat tub of monkey shit. And I was like, this is the best roll of the day.
Hell
I'm ready
yeah.
to go. Like
Yes.
it was so much fun. And all of that's built on trust
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
genuine sort of friendship.
Right.
And it's funny because, like, how do you know where that line is other than to be in the milieu?
Right,
You know,
right.
You can't
And to
learn
push that line.
Yeah.
Like it's like you don't learn how to do that without offending some people. You know?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's like that's the other side of it. It's like it's okay to offend someone,
Right.
And then
Then be like,
apologize,
right.
Yeah, then
Like
you
and
learn
say,
how
"Oh my
to
god, I'm so
apologize."
sorry." Like
Yeah.
I was joking, you
Right.
know. Like how many times have I had to say that in my life?
Oh, yeah.
like
Oh,
many
my God.
many times, you know. And so that's like it is a. I mean, when it comes back to alpha males, I think that in my in reading that. I have been around people who have tried to come across as alpha males.
Right.
Yeah.
And those people never rang true to me. You know, because a lot of the way that they describe alpha males, right, is like this dominant,
Yeah.
like assertive, like leader almost.
Right.
But in a way that is like it can come, like the people who I knew who were like that were profoundly insecure, like who were underneath the surface. That was a protective thing for themselves, you know, like more than anything else. And so it's like, I don't know.
It's like an insecure male's projection
Yes.
of what a strong masculine presence would be.
Yeah.
exactly
The way like Donald Trump is like what a poor person's version of
Yes.
a rich
Right.
person looks
Yep.
like.
exactly.
It's funny because like if you think about like the idea of this vacuity of good masculine role models, and then that vacuity gets filled with this kind of like douchebaggery. I think you're 100% right that it really does boil down to insecurity. Because when you think of like what's a real alpha male,
Right.
it comes from nature, right?
Right.
It's like chimps and wolves.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
like-
Wolves. That's when I first heard of it, for sure.
and
was
Yeah.
with wolves.
What does that signify? It signifies violence. Like they
Right.
are the strongest animal that can hurt the other animals in the pack. And so it's like this raw, simplistic idea of what it is to be strong.
Yep.
And it's like this sort of misappropriation of natural, which I think is another piece where it's like misappropriation of, what could be a normal biological principle, but then saying like, in this kind of bullheaded, dumb way,
Yeah.
like, no, but that, if you have this kind of genitals, then,
right.
it's like, that's not what anybody's saying. You
Right.
fucking,
Yeah, exactly.
know?
Exactly.
Well, and that and like the whole idea about alpha wolf is is not true. I mean,
Right.
like they don't. It's not like one is in charge, and if that is that one in charge, it's usually two. Like
Right.
it's usually at least like the
A female.
pair.
Right.
But then like the focus isn't on dominance. Like the focus is on care for the pack.
Sustainability of
Right?
the pack.
That's
Yes,
the
exactly.
thing that
leadership.
is so missing. And I think the more I try to read about, there's a book I always go back to. It's called Warrior King Magician Lover. Have I talked about it before?
Not in here. but-
It's called Warrior King Magician Lover, and it's about masculine archetypes, which I'm just fascinated with archetypes. And you think if I said to you like the archetype of the king, like what do you think of like when you think of a king, right? It's like you're ruling, you're in charge, you're overseeing the realm. But like the point of that is the actual like the healthy sacred masculine king is like a nurturer. He like, and it's like examples of like, well, like gardening is like a king activity because you are growing, you are providing, and like you have audiences with your people, not to be seen, but to like see your people. It's
Right.
like not like, please come into my like domicile, like, let's all bow before the king. It's like, no, I want to see what my people are doing. So it's like there's a big emphasis on care that is totally ignored when we talk about the myth or like the latest alpha male. It's like more on dominance instead of like, well, no, you're supposed to like provide, like either physically or like emotionally, like provide spaces for like that. And that's just, I think, one thing that like is not being addressed is like the role of caring for the realm, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like and humans are so much more complex in their emotional and pack mentalities, right? It's like leading a pack of wolves is based in violence, right?
Yeah.
Their food, violence.
Yep.
Like every single aspect of their lives are basically surrounding their ability to be violent and protect themselves from violence.
And what's interesting is we have limbic systems.
Of course.
You know what I mean? So we
have it in us.
We have the capacity for violence, to hunt, to go and kill,
Better than anything ever that has
Yeah,
ever existed.
we are the apex
predator.
predator.
Yeah.
But it's funny to me that, when you think about nurturing, and I think that there is this sort of spectrum of YouTube, like, I want to say male targeted audience type of material, where a lot of it is that, where it's like, be a good provider, be able to defend your household, be able to,
That's true.
and a lot of that stuff, like you could watch it for a long time and not really, like it might not be your culture, but it's not going to be something that is actually making a political statement one way or the other.
Yeah.
And then but that algorithmically starts leading you into the other side of things. Where
Right.
it's this like incel, angry, men's rights,
Right.
anti-woke, and then boom,
Victimhood, like absolutely.
And if you think about it, that's like the opposite
It is.
of that archetype of
Yeah.
being, it's like being a stoic sort of like provider,
Right.
a strong person.
Yeah.
They're whining.
Yeah,
Bunch of
exactly. Whining
whiny
nonstop about what they want and what they need. That's true. That is true.
Yeah. It's the more I like try to like think about and read about this, like, I mean, it's a big thing. Like there's one speaker, I think his name is Scott Galloway. I mean, if I showed you a picture, you'd recognize him. He's like, I think he teaches at NYU, but he often talks about like this younger generation, men in particular, how I think you even said it, Josh, like not going to do as well as the generation before them, as their parents. Their economic prospects aren't as great. They're not dating. They're not seeing people. Like there's no real intention for relationships. Like they're fine to be alone. And it's one of those things where it's like there's a middle ground somewhere where like I'm not saying it's all one side's fault or the other, but like is it all of the men's faults that they're not dating? There's some responsibility there. Like you need to like, learn how to like behave and what is acceptable and what women will no longer tolerate in a partner.
Right.
And also like there's learning to do on both sides. But it's very interesting, and just like how do we even start? Like how does this generation kind of like like start to grow from that when I feel like it's so many years of just like becoming more bitter and angry.
Well, and also,
you know?
like you said, I think that a lot of the alpha male behavior stems from wanting to get laid. Like it's like from wanting to get laid,
started
and
there, yeah.
and with incels and like that kind of energy, online pornography and like the ability to self-satiate
yeah.
has, I think, is the major, most important aspect of this generation, where like there's too much like access to those type of things, to where if you consistently teach your brain that you don't have to put yourself out there to meet someone, you actually can just be free to be by yourself, and you can be right about everything if you look online.
Right.
You can find things that support your worldview, that make you the victim, that it's never your fault, that, and you hate women, like, and hate women, which leads to more violence against women, which leads to sexual assault and different, like those things are so toxic and set up to be like that. It's like,
it's kind of fascinating too, because if you take it out of the context of American culture and you look at like how porn might be affecting generational, like I was just reading about how in Japan you're getting to have this culture of shut-ins where it's totally not like the kind of, you know, women are blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They're just like not
Apathetic.
doing it.
Yeah.
They're just not doing any of
Not
that. They're like,
interested.
you know what, I'm not interested in trying to do that. And so it's really fascinating because I think, you know, when you were talking earlier, like I think that all of us, men, women, and every spectrum of identity in between, everybody needs to work on themselves right now.
of course,
You know, like we're in a tough
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
we are.
You know, if you look at Clio Dynamics, the idea that it's like data-driven sort of analysis of when things might happen or when things have happened. And it's like a scientific computer-based model thing. And so one of the things is like we have too many people that are raised to be in positions of elite power holding and not enough positions of elite power, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, not only do we have men who used to be conditioned to think like, okay, it's men competing against other men to be the top of the food chain and be the best provider and best man.
Right.
Now they're competing with women too.
Yep.
And that alone is like sort of, and women are winning. By the way.
Absolutely
Like they
they
are
are.
doing much
Yes.
better. At running.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this.
Can
This
you
is
imagine?
the best run organization I've ever worked for. I'm not joking. It's not just because
No,
you're
it's
married
true.
to the boss.
No, you're right.
I'm saying like this is the best run organization I've ever worked for. And I realized a couple of months ago, I was like, oh my God, this is the first place I've worked where like the entire board and management is all women. And I was like, oh. Yeah, I was like, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, so it's like, it's funny because in this sort of competition for positions of elite power and top sort of financial positioning, you know, like men and women are now competing for the same slots and women are winning.
Yeah.
And there's got to be a factor to that.
Well, and I
Because,
think
you
that
know,
totally affects, like, it is another way that side of it is able to make it so that you're the victim.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like oh,
Big
and
time.
also women suck too.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like well, wait, I thought we were all trying to get laid. Like it's like, you know,
it's like instead they like took my job and now I can't buy a house.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that is it's a super complex time.
It is, and it like young. I think young men, like in, you know, like late teens into the 20s, there aren't the. I think what it comes down to is because I often reflect on watching my father as I was young, and like he always had like one of my other friends' dads who they're very close to, but like a small group, and they would always do like stuff. Like one time they got way into hiking the Appalachian Trail. Like we grew up in New Jersey, so the trail was maybe like an hour north. They got into kayaking, and like I always thought like just into one random thing and then another random thing. And then like I turned 35 and I was like, oh,
I get it.
I get it.
I
now.
not only do I get it, but like that was brilliant.
Yes.
Like you found a thing that was like, oh, we should all do this together. And he had a group that was like,
That's great.
let's do it. You know
Let's
what
do
I
it.
mean? And so I think there's that support that is harder to come by because of like what we talk like the isolation
Yeah.
and the lack of role models.
Well, and it's easier to avoid people altogether.
Yeah.
Right? It is. It's
Disengage.
easier. The pandemic showed it.
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like I'm still coming out of the comfort
Right.
that is isolation.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like where it's like, I don't have to deal with anyone.
No. Yeah.
You know, like if I really don't want to, you know, I don't have to go to the grocery store. I can order it. I don't have to I can order
Right.
everything I want directly to my
I
house.
know.
Oh, I don't have to, I can go on Amazon. You know, like whatever you need, you can get delivered to you to avoid all complex interaction. And that's what we need so
Oh man,
badly as human beings.
there are so many times, and Jeannie would attest to this. I might even ask her the next time where she's in front of a microphone. But whenever we have to like go anywhere, do anything, I'll often I'm just like, ugh, I can do something, but I could do nothing, or like I can get it done here. I don't need to go. And then it would be rare if I didn't finish that event, that whatever, and think, oh, I'm really glad I did that.
Yes.
Like, I'm glad I like talked to people and connected and like hung out with either someone new or friends or something. I'm like, yep, you're right. I'm glad I did that, and I will try not to fight you on it next time.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of begs the question too of like how much convenience is affecting younger men, where it's
Yeah.
like, if you think about it, I saw one kind of funny study, like I think it's funny, but it's also probably part of where this like self-consciousness and you know, feeling emasculated, but like, so hand strength keeps going down. Like your dad's hands are stronger than your hands. Your hands are way stronger than your son's hands, and it just keeps going. Like,
Really?
and so nobody knows exactly why.
Wow.
But I mean, I think if you think about like you and I are about the same age, like we had to hand unroll every window in the house.
Yeah.
like pushing stuff up and down was hard. You had to like unscrew the back of your Teddy Ruxpin to get the battery in that thing.
Yeah, that's
You know?
true.
And so it's like there's a lot of conditioning where it's like everything should be effortlessly
Yeah.
easy.
Right.
And I think a lot of what, in my personal opinion of like what makes a man, you know, is like being willing to do what needs to be done even when it's hard.
Yes.
You know, and like,
Absolutely.
that is, and I've, you know, when I fail that standard for myself, that's when I'm like, I need to work, you know, I got to do some work on myself. And so I think if you're raised in an environment where everything is literally designed to be like effortlessly just placed
right
in front of you,
at the tip of your
and
fingers.
it's not their fault.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
for
that's the
God's
hard
sake.
part.
Yeah,
It's
not
like
their
they are
fault.
sort of victims in that.
Yes.
Like it's like these men who have these, you know, these young men who feel this way, they're not wrong.
Right.
And that's the thing that I think they feel like the world sees them as wrong
Yeah.
for
Right.
feeling that way.
They feel
And so it creates
insufficient.
this cycle of like,
Yeah.
oh, everyone thinks this about me and it's
Yeah.
because of them.
Right.
And it's like, but it's, and so that's really cruel. It's
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
very
I
cruel
saw
time.
someone on TikTok who, she was a woman who said, okay, like these men, like we can complain about them, we can say how terrible they are, but like that's not helping. And you're not going to want to hear this, but like there needs to be some reaching out in
Yes.
some way,
Yeah,
like
of
how to
course.
like not only to like try to correct behavior that's going on, but like prevent this behavior in younger boys when they grow up and become men. And it was a very honest, and like she got a lot of replies about like what is making like men angry, like what do they need support with, what are they afraid to say or do or show to either a partner or friend group. And it was like the first time where I saw like an honest like, hey, like we need to reach out. Like this problem isn't going to be like, we can't yell at it and say it's terrible and it's going to go away.
You can't shame it away.
Right.
For
And-
sure.
And they are suffering, you know? I mean, like it's
Exactly.
born out of suffering. It's
Yeah.
not born out of thinking, you know, ideologically that they're actually superior to this or that.
Yeah.
It's,
Right.
it's a complete it's a symptom of I think a really deep sense of lack of self-worth. you know?
Totally. That insecurity is pervasive through. I mean, that's why I think when I was a kid, I was lucky. My dad is in my opinion, he never yelled at us. He was like a super kind, patient man who I always felt like it takes so much courage and he took the brunt of shit from people, from toxic men, you know, like, and I think that other men maybe thought my dad was weird in his sensitivity and his ability to, I don't know, be more sensitive and accepting of things. And I think there has to be that taking of both,
Yeah.
you know, like where it's like, you can be that man that is like primal, like in that way. And like, it takes a lot of courage and strength to be humble,
Yeah.
right? To be humble and
that's-
to be kind.
That
and
is
to
way
be,
harder.
right. It's
than it is
so
to,
hard.
To
Like
be a hothead.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
takes confidence. Like
Yeah.
it actually takes confidence to be humble.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like, and
Well, and
that's
if you
like
think about it, it's kind of the difference between being emotionally reactive in one way or the other, whether you blow up and like start becoming threatening, or you like, are like, you start begging for
Right,
their
yeah.
Right.
acceptance. It takes a lot of courage to, I think, remain still in the face of somebody being
Oh my
disrespectful
God,
or
yes.
trying to abuse you
Yeah.
know, like just staring at them until they apologize.
yeah, right.
Yeah, man. Well, you know what? I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
It's a good thing we got 4 more dude casts
On the
already
schedule.
already on this.
Yeah, buddy.
Lightweight, baby.
Oh man, no. As always, I love the dude cast.
too.
And shameless plug. We just talked about today in our staff meeting how we will be starting a Wi-Fi men's group.
Awesome.
We're looking at the once a month and second weekend in March is the goal.
Yep.
We got some planning to do, but it's probably going to all be virtual. We're
Yep.
gonna do it online.
Nice.
But it's definitely something we will be offering this spring.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
look
the
for,
space.
look for that. So stuff like this we can solve the
Dive
world's
into.
problems and dive into,
That's
and
right.
support and make a community.
Let's find some incels.
Let's do it.
Everybody
All-
bring one incel.
Everyone bring an incel, and
Bring
we'll
your
change the
incel,
world.
and we're gonna fix
There
it.
we go. Let's start reaching out. For the Wi-Fi Pod Dudecast, this is Matt.
This is Brian.
And this is Josh.
Thanks, everyone.